The church smelled like white roses and expensive perfume. Everyone said it was the perfect wedding. The perfect bride. The perfect groom. The perfect family. But what nobody knew was that by the end of the ceremony, my entire life would collapse in front of 200 guests. And the only reason the truth survived was because a photographer kept clicking his camera. I remember the exact moment everything started to feel wrong. It was the morning of my wedding. I was standing in front of the mirror in the bridal suite, staring at myself in a dress that had taken me 9 months to design. 9 months. 9 months of planning, crying, arguing with vendors, and working overtime just to pay for this wedding. My name is Elena Carter, and that day was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, it became the day I discovered my family had been betraying me for years. Behind me, my mother adjusted my veil. "Don't move," she said sharply. "You'll wrinkle the dress." That was typical of her. My mother never cared about feelings. Only appearances. "You look beautiful," she added, but it sounded rehearsed. Almost forced. I smiled politely. But something inside me felt off. Then my younger sister Lily walked into the room. And everything changed. Lily had always been the favorite. She was charming. Funny. The kind of person everyone instantly loved. Teachers adored her. Friends followed her. And my parents practically worshipped her. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one. The quiet one. The one who worked hard and never complained. Growing up, I used to think that balance made sense. But later, I realized something painful. Lily didn't just want attention. She wanted everything. Including things that belonged to me. "Wow," Lily said, leaning against the doorframe. "You actually look good." I laughed awkwardly. "Thanks. I think." She walked closer, examining my dress like a critic. "You sure Daniel likes this style?" she asked. I frowned. Of course he does. Daniel was my fiancé. We had been together for 4 years. He proposed last winter during a snowstorm. Or at least, that's what I thought. At the time, it felt romantic. Looking back now, I realized something else. Lily had been there that night too. "Relax," Lily said with a smirk. "I'm just asking." My mother suddenly turned toward her. "Lily, help me with the vows envelope." That sentence meant nothing to me at the time. Just a normal wedding detail. The officiant was going to read our personal vows. So my parents had offered to hold the envelopes. I trusted them completely. Big mistake. 20 minutes later, the ceremony started. Music filled the church. Guests stood up. And I began walking down the aisle. Everything looked perfect. Daniel was standing at the altar in his black suit. He looked nervous, but excited. At least that's what I thought. When I reached him, he squeezed my hand. "You look beautiful," he whispered. I smiled. But then something strange happened. I noticed Lily sitting in the front row. Not beside our parents. Beside the aisle. Almost ready to stand up. A chill ran down my spine. But before I could question it, the officiant began speaking. "Dearly beloved." The ceremony continued normally. Until we reached the vows. My father stood up and handed the envelopes to the officiant. He smiled proudly. Like the proud father of the bride. But something about that smile felt wrong. The officiant opened the first envelope. Daniel will begin. Daniel cleared his throat and started reading. From the moment Lily walked into my life, the entire church went silent. I blinked. Wait. What? Lily? My heart started pounding. Daniel looked confused too. He looked down at the paper again. Then at me. Then at Lily. And suddenly, Lily stood up. Smiling. Like she had been waiting for that exact moment. The whispers began immediately. Guests turned their heads. My mother looked nervous. My father avoided my eyes. And Lily slowly walked toward the altar. In front of everyone. In front of my wedding. Sorry, Elena, she said sweetly. But we should stop pretending. My world froze. What are you talking about? I whispered. She smiled wider. The truth. Then she turned toward Daniel. Tell them. Daniel looked pale. I didn't know about the vows, he stammered. But Lily laughed. Oh, come on. You were going to tell her eventually. The room exploded with murmurs. My stomach dropped. And then the photographer's camera flashed. Once. Twice. 3 times. Capturing everything. And none of us realized yet. Those photos were about to destroy my entire family. For a few seconds, nobody in the church moved. It was like the entire room had frozen in time. 200 guests stared at the altar, confused and whispering to each other. My sister stood beside me in my wedding venue, smiling like she had just won something. I felt my chest tighten. What are you doing, Lily? I asked quietly. But my voice was shaking. She looked at me the way someone looks at a stranger. Almost like I didn't belong there anymore. I'm fixing a mistake, she replied calmly. A mistake. Those 2 words echoed inside my head. Behind us, the photographer kept taking pictures. Click. 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 At the time, I thought it was strange he hadn't stopped. But later, I realized something important. He had already sensed the drama unfolding. And photographers know one rule better than anyone else. Never stop recording the moment. I turned to Daniel. My fiancé. The man who was supposed to become my husband in less than 5 minutes. He looked pale. Sweat glistened on his forehead. Daniel, I whispered. What is she talking about? He opened his mouth but didn't answer. That silence felt louder than any confession. My heart began beating faster. Daniel? I repeated. Lily crossed her arms. Oh my God, this is painful to watch, she said dramatically. Just tell her. Guests in the front row leaned closer. My aunt covered her mouth. Someone in the back whispered loudly. Is this real? My mother suddenly stood up. Lily, stop this right now. But her voice lacked authority. And Lily knew it. Oh please, Lily laughed. You were the one who said she deserved the truth. The entire room turned toward my mother. Her face turned white. My stomach dropped. Wait. What? I looked at my father. He refused to meet my eyes. That was when I realized something terrifying. They knew. My parents knew something I didn't. Mom, I said slowly, what is she talking about? My mother opened her mouth. But no words came out. Instead, Lily stepped closer to Daniel and placed her hand on his arm. The same arm I had held during our engagement photos. The same arm I had imagined walking with for the rest of my life. My vision blurred. For years, Lily said softly. That's how long this lie has lasted. The church erupted in louder whispers. What lie? I asked. But deep down, I already felt the answer creeping into my mind. And I didn't want to hear it. Daniel finally spoke. Elena. I was going to tell you. Those words cut deeper than a knife. Going to tell me. Not there's nothing going on. Not she's lying. Just. I was going to tell you. What? I said weakly. Lily smirked. Oh my God, Elena, don't make him suffer like this. Then she looked directly at the guests. Yes. Daniel and I have been seeing each other. Gasps filled the room. I felt like the floor had disappeared under my feet. Since when? Someone whispered loudly. Lily smiled proudly. Before the engagement. The words hit me like a physical blow. Before the engagement. My mind replayed every memory. Every date. Every vacation. Every late-night message. Had all of it been fake? Daniel, I said, forcing the words out, tell me she's lying. He closed his eyes. That silence again. That horrible silence. I didn't plan for it to happen, he said. And that was the moment my heart broke. Not cracked. Not bent. Shattered. Are you serious right now? I said. My voice grew louder. You cheated on me with my sister? The church was completely silent. Nobody even pretended to breathe. Daniel rubbed his face. It started 2 years ago. 2 years. My legs felt weak. 2 years meant half of our relationship had been a lie. Half of our memories. Half of our future. All fake. But don't worry, Lily said sweetly. We didn't want to hurt you. The absurdity of that sentence made me laugh. A hollow, broken laugh. You didn't want to hurt me? I repeated. You waited until my wedding day. Lily shrugged. Timing is complicated. Behind us, another camera flash lit the altar. The photographer. Still capturing everything. And now, I noticed something strange. He wasn't just photographing the scene. He kept zooming in on my parents. Specifically, their reactions. My mother looked like she might faint. My father looked guilty. And suddenly a terrifying thought appeared in my mind. What did you mean earlier? I asked Lily. She raised an eyebrow. When? You said Mom told you I deserved the truth. My mother's eyes widened instantly. Lily. Too late. Lily smiled. Oh, right. She turned to the guests like someone delivering a speech. Fun fact, she said. Our parents have known about Daniel and me for months. The church exploded. People stood up. Gasps filled the air. My vision went dark around the edges. I turned slowly toward my parents. Tell me she's lying, I whispered. My father looked down. My mother started crying. And that was answer enough. Something inside me snapped. You knew? I said. My voice echoed across the church. You both knew? My mother sobbed. We were trying to protect you. Protect me? I shouted. You helped plan my wedding. My father finally spoke. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I laughed again. That broken laugh. Then how was it supposed to happen? Nobody answered. And that's when the photographer lowered his camera. For the first time since the chaos started. He stared at my parents with a strange expression. Like he had just realized something important. Something bigger than the cheating. Something darker. Then he looked directly at me. And quietly said 4 words that would change everything. You need to see these photos. I frowned. What photos? He swallowed. The ones I took earlier. A chill ran through my body. Because suddenly, I had a horrible feeling. The cheating scandal wasn't the biggest secret in the room. Not even close. The church was no longer a wedding venue. It had turned into a courtroom. Guests whispered loudly. Chairs scraped against the floor as people stood to get a better view. My wedding had become a spectacle. And I was standing in the middle of it, still wearing my white dress. Still holding the bouquet that suddenly felt ridiculous in my hands. Across from me stood my sister. Beside her stood the man who was supposed to marry me. And in the front row, my parents avoided my eyes. But what the photographer said echoed in my mind. You need to see these photos. I turned toward him. The photographer had been hired by Daniel's family. His name was Mark. I barely knew him. But now he looked unusually serious. What photos? I asked. Mark hesitated. He glanced toward my parents. Then toward Lily. Then back at me. The ones I took before the ceremony started, he said quietly. My stomach tightened. What about them? He slowly lifted his camera. I think you should look at them. My father immediately stepped forward. No, he said firmly. Every head turned toward him. That's not necessary. Not necessary. Those words only made the room more suspicious. Mark frowned. Sir, with all due respect, I think she deserves to see. My mother suddenly grabbed my father's arm. Maybe we should talk about this later, she whispered nervously. Later. They wanted later. But my entire life had just exploded in front of 200 people. There is no later, I said. My voice was shaking again. Show me the photos. Mark walked slowly toward the altar. I noticed something strange. His hands were slightly trembling. Not from fear. From hesitation. Like he knew what I was about to see would hurt. He stopped beside me and turned the camera screen toward me. This was taken 40 minutes before the ceremony, he said. I leaned closer. And then I saw it. The photo showed the hallway outside the bridal suite. My mother. My father. Daniel. And Lily. Standing together. Talking. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was what they were doing. My mother was handing Lily something. A small white envelope. My heart skipped a beat. The vows envelope. I looked up slowly. Why are you giving Lily the vows envelope? I asked my mother. She didn't answer. She couldn't. The church filled with whispers again. Wait, does that mean? Did they switch the vows on purpose? Is this staged? Mark scrolled to the next photo. This one was worse. Much worse. Lily was laughing. Daniel looked nervous. And my father was patting Daniel on the shoulder. Like he was encouraging him. Like he approved. My vision blurred. You helped them? I whispered. My father stayed silent. That silence confirmed everything. Mark showed the third photo. This one made the entire church gasp. Because in that photo, Lily was wearing something. Something white. My breath caught. A dress. Not a full wedding gown. But clearly a white formal dress hidden under her coat. Like she had been ready for this moment all along. The moment she walked toward the altar. The moment she replaced me. Someone in the audience shouted. This was planned. Another voice said. They set her up. The whispers turned into angry murmurs. My aunt stood up. You did this to your own daughter? She yelled at my parents. My mother covered her face. We didn't know how else to fix things, she cried. Fix things. That phrase made my blood boil. Fix what? I shouted. My voice echoed through the church walls. And finally, my father answered. Daniel loves Lily, he said quietly. Those 4 words hit me like a truck. So you decided to humiliate me in front of everyone? I asked. It wasn't supposed to be humiliating, my father said. We thought it would be easier if the truth came out during the ceremony. I stared at him. Stunned. You thought this was the easy way? Guests began arguing loudly now. Some people looked furious. Others looked horrified. And the photographer kept standing beside me, watching everything carefully. Then he said something unexpected. There's one more photo. My stomach twisted. One more? He nodded slowly. This one is different. The tone of his voice made the entire room quiet again. What do you mean? I asked. Mark hesitated. Then he turned the camera screen toward me again. The photo wasn't taken in the hallway. It was taken outside the church. Near the parking lot. And it showed something that made my heart stop completely. Daniel. Lily. Standing very close together. Kissing. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was when the photo had been taken. I looked at the timestamp in the corner of the screen. My hands began shaking. Mark, I whispered. This was taken yesterday. He nodded slowly. Yes. The room stayed silent. Because everyone suddenly realized something at the same time. Daniel hadn't just cheated years ago. He was still cheating. Even one day before the wedding. I felt something inside me change. The heartbreak. The confusion. The shock. It all burned away. Leaving behind something colder. Anger. Real anger. I slowly turned toward Daniel and Lily. They both looked terrified now. For the first time all day. Good. Congratulations, I said calmly. The entire church went quiet again. You wanted the truth to come out today. I dropped my bouquet on the floor. The flowers scattered across the altar. Now it has. But what nobody in that church realized yet was that the photographer had accidentally uncovered one more secret. A secret hiding in the background of those photos. A secret that would destroy my parents completely. And he hadn't told anyone about it. Yet. The church had gone quiet again. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The heavy kind. The kind where everyone feels like something worse is about to happen. My bouquet still lay on the floor between Daniel and me, white roses scattered across the altar like pieces of a broken promise. Daniel avoided my eyes. Lily looked annoyed rather than guilty. And my parents. They looked terrified. Not embarrassed. Not ashamed. Terrified. At first I thought it was because the truth about the affair had come out. But then I noticed something strange. The photographer, Mark, was staring at his camera again. Zooming in. Zooming out. Over and over. Like he was trying to confirm something. "What is it?" I asked. Mark looked up quickly. Almost like he had been caught doing something he shouldn't. "Nothing," he said too fast. That answer immediately raised my suspicion. "You don't look like it's nothing." Guests leaned closer again. The room had become completely invested in the drama now. Daniel rubbed his temples. "Can we stop this?" he muttered. But nobody was listening to him anymore. Mark hesitated. Then he looked at my parents again. My father's face turned pale. That reaction alone told me everything. "There's something else in the photos," Mark said slowly. My stomach tightened. "What do you mean something else?" He turned the camera screen toward me again. "This is the parking lot photo," he explained. "Yes, I know," I said impatiently. "The one where my fiancé is kissing my sister." But Mark shook his head. "Look at the background." I leaned closer. At first, I didn't see anything unusual. Just Daniel and Lily standing close together. The church entrance behind them. Cars in the parking lot. Then Mark zoomed in. A black car appeared in the corner of the frame. My father's car. But that wasn't what caught my attention. Someone was sitting inside. My breath caught. "Wait," I whispered. Mark zoomed in further. And suddenly I recognized the person in the driver's seat. My mother. But that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was what she was doing. She wasn't looking shocked. She wasn't angry. She wasn't stopping them. She was smiling. Watching them kiss. Like she already knew. Like she approved. The entire church gasped when Mark turned the screen toward the audience. "She was watching them," someone whispered. "That's sick," another guest said. My heart pounded violently. "Mom," I said slowly, "why were you in the parking lot yesterday?" My mother didn't answer. Tears rolled down her face. My father stepped forward quickly. "That photo doesn't prove anything." But Mark spoke again. "That's not the only one." The entire room froze. "There's more?" I asked. Mark nodded. "A lot more." He scrolled through the photos. Then he stopped at one that made my blood run cold. This photo had been taken 2 months ago. During our engagement party. And it showed something none of us had noticed at the time. In the background of the photo, Daniel and Lily were holding hands. Behind the garden wall. Trying to hide. But the camera had caught everything. The guests exploded into whispers again. "Oh my God. They were doing this during the engagement? And the parents knew?" My aunt stood up angrily. "You people are unbelievable." But Mark wasn't finished yet. He scrolled again and showed another photo. This one had been taken last week. During the rehearsal dinner. Daniel and Lily sitting extremely close together at a table. Too close. My father standing beside them. Talking calmly. Like everything was normal. Like nothing was wrong. I felt my chest tighten. You knew the entire time, I whispered. My parents stayed silent. You watched them together. Still nothing. You helped them. My mother finally spoke through her tears. We thought you would understand eventually. Those words shattered the last piece of respect I had left. Understand what? I shouted. That my sister stole my fiancé? My father sighed heavily. You and Daniel weren't right for each other. That sentence felt like a slap. And Lily is? I asked bitterly. Yes, he said quietly. The honesty of his answer stunned the entire room. For a moment nobody spoke. Then suddenly, Mark leaned closer to me again. There's still something else, he whispered. My stomach dropped again. What now? He turned the camera screen toward me one last time. This photo had been taken only 10 minutes before the ceremony. Inside the church hallway. Daniel. Lily. My parents. All standing together. But this time something different was happening. Something that made my heart race. My father was handing Daniel something. Not the vows envelope. Something smaller. A folded document. Mark zoomed in slowly. The words at the top became clear. Marriage license. My mind went blank. What is that? I whispered. Mark answered quietly. It looks like a signed marriage license. The church erupted again. People started shouting. Wait, what? Are they already married? My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. I turned slowly toward Daniel. His face had gone completely white. Daniel, I said quietly. Why is my father giving you a marriage license? Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And then Lily smiled again. The same confident smile she had worn all day. And said the one sentence that destroyed what little sanity remained in that church. Because this wedding, she paused dramatically, was never supposed to be yours. The church erupted into chaos. Guests were whispering, some standing, some pulling out their phones to record. A wedding that had begun as a celebration had now turned into a public scandal. But I barely heard any of it. My ears were ringing. Because Lily's words echoed louder than everything else. This wedding was never supposed to be yours. I stared at her, trying to understand what she meant. What are you talking about? I asked slowly. Lily sighed like she was tired of explaining something obvious. Elena, you really didn't figure it out yet? My chest tightened. Figure out what? Daniel looked like he wanted to disappear. My parents looked like they wanted the ground to swallow them whole. And Lily. Lily looked completely relaxed. Like this entire moment had been rehearsed. She stepped forward and picked up the marriage license from my father's shaking hands. Then she held it up for everyone to see. This, she said calmly, was supposed to be signed today. The room went silent again. By me, she continued. And Daniel. Gasps filled the church. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. No, I whispered. That's not possible. But Lily only tilted her head. Why not? I shook my head, trying to make sense of it. This wedding is mine. My name is on the invitations. I planned everything. I paid for most of it. That's true, Lily admitted. Her smile widened. And we really appreciate it. The words hit me like ice water. We? I turned slowly toward my parents. My mother looked completely broken. But my father still looked defensive. Dad, I said quietly, tell me she's lying. He didn't answer immediately. And that silence told me everything. But he eventually sighed and spoke. This wasn't the original plan. My hands started shaking. What do you mean original plan? My father rubbed his forehead. Daniel and Lily came to us 6 months ago. My heart pounded harder. 6 months? Yes, he said. They told us they were in love. The church murmured again. I felt dizzy. 6 months ago. That was when Daniel started acting distant. When he said work was stressful. When he canceled our weekend trips. My stomach turned. So instead of telling me, I said slowly, you decided to lie to me? We didn't know how to tell you, my mother cried. You didn't know how to tell me, so you let me plan my own humiliation? My father stepped forward. We thought the ceremony would make it easier. That sentence made several guests gasp. Even Daniel looked shocked by it. Easier? I repeated. Yes, my father said quietly. If the truth came out during the wedding, everyone would already be here. I stared at him in disbelief. You invited 200 people to watch my life fall apart. My father looked ashamed but didn't deny it. The anger inside me started to grow again. You used me, I said. You used my wedding planning. You used my money. You used my trust. And the whole time you were planning to replace me with Lily? Nobody answered. Because nobody could. Daniel finally spoke. This wasn't how I wanted it to happen. I turned toward him slowly. Oh, really? Yes, he said quickly. I told them we should tell you before the wedding. Lily rolled her eyes. Daniel, please. He looked uncomfortable. I did, he insisted weakly. But Lily cut him off. You also said you didn't want to cancel the venue deposit. The room burst into shocked whispers again. My mouth fell open. Wait, I said. You kept the wedding because you didn't want to lose the deposit? Lily shrugged. This venue was expensive. I laughed. Not because anything was funny. But because the situation had become so absurd that laughing felt easier than crying. So let me get this straight, I said. You two cheated on me for years. You convinced my parents to support you. You let me organize and pay for my own wedding. And your plan was to reveal everything at the altar, and then get married instead? Lily nodded casually. That was the idea. The room exploded again. Someone shouted, "That's evil." Another guest said, "This family is insane." But Lily seemed completely unfazed. Honestly, Elena, she said, you're overreacting. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Overreacting? I repeated slowly. Yes, Lily said. You would have found out eventually anyway. I stepped closer to her. So you thought ruining my wedding day in front of everyone would make it better? Well, she said thoughtfully. At least you didn't have to find out on your honeymoon. Several guests gasped loudly. Even Daniel looked shocked at her cruelty. But before I could respond, Mark, the photographer, suddenly spoke again. Actually, he said quietly, there's still one thing that doesn't make sense. Everyone turned toward him. What? I asked. Mark looked at the camera again. Then at Daniel. Then at my parents. This marriage license, he said slowly. It was issued 3 days ago. The room went silent again. So? Lily said impatiently. So, Mark continued, that means something strange. My heart started racing again. What strange thing? Mark hesitated. Then he said the sentence that made the entire church freeze. According to this document, Daniel was never legally engaged to Elena. My mind went completely blank. What? Mark zoomed into the photo again. The name on the license became clear. Not Elena Carter. But someone else. Someone standing only a few feet away from me. The bride listed on the document was Lily. The church erupted in confusion. People started shouting questions. How is that possible? What does that mean? But I was staring only at Daniel. My voice came out as a whisper. You never filed our engagement paperwork, did you? Daniel couldn't look at me. And that silence told me everything again. The engagement ring. The proposal. The promises. They had all been real to me. But legally, they had never existed. And that's when I realized something terrifying. This entire wedding, the venue, the invitations, the decorations, the dress, the ceremony, everything had been built around a lie. But what nobody in the church realized yet was that the photographer had just uncovered another secret hidden in the marriage license photo. A detail so shocking, it would completely destroy my parents' reputation forever. And Mark had just noticed it. The church had fallen into another stunned silence. Everyone was staring at the camera screen in Mark's hands. The name on the marriage license was clear. Bride, Lily Carter. Groom, Daniel Hayes. Not me. Never me. For a moment, my mind refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. For years together. A proposal. An engagement ring. Wedding invitations printed with my name. And yet legally, none of it had ever existed. I slowly turned toward Daniel. So the proposal was fake? I asked. My voice sounded calm. Too calm. Daniel swallowed hard. It wasn't fake. I laughed bitterly. Oh, really? You just forgot to mention that the paperwork listed my sister instead of me? Daniel rubbed his face nervously. It's complicated. That phrase made several guests groan in frustration. Lily rolled her eyes. Oh my God, Daniel. Just tell her. But Daniel didn't speak. Instead, my father did. It wasn't Daniel's idea, my father said quietly. Every head in the church turned toward him. What? I whispered. My father looked exhausted now. Like a man who knew he couldn't hide the truth anymore. The marriage license was my idea. Gasps filled the church again. Even Lily looked surprised. Dad, she said. But he ignored her. You and Daniel were arguing constantly, he said to me. That's not true, I replied immediately. But deep down, I remembered. The fights. The distance. The strange tension in the last year. My father continued. I could see the relationship wasn't working. So you replaced me with Lily? I said in disbelief. It wasn't like that, he insisted. But Lily suddenly laughed. Oh, come on, Dad. That's exactly what you did. The entire church watched in silence. You said Elena was too serious, Lily continued. You said Daniel needed someone more fun. My stomach twisted. You told us we would make a better couple. My father didn't deny it. And that hurt more than anything else. My mother suddenly spoke through her tears. We thought it would work out better this way. The cruelty of that sentence echoed across the church. Better. For who? Certainly not for me. I looked down at the marriage license photo again, trying to understand everything. Then something caught my attention. A small detail in the corner of the document. A signature. Not Daniel's. Not Lily's. A witness signature. Mark noticed my reaction immediately. You see it too? He asked quietly. Yes, I whispered. The witness name looked familiar. Too familiar. Mark zoomed in further. The name became clear. Witness, Margaret Carter. My mother. The entire room gasped again. You signed their marriage license? I said slowly. My mother broke down crying. We didn't know how to stop it anymore. Stop it? I repeated. You were helping them. But Mark suddenly raised a finger. Wait. Everyone turned toward him again. What? I asked. Mark zoomed in further. There's another witness signature. My heart started racing again. Another one? Yes. He enlarged the bottom corner of the document. And suddenly the second name appeared. Witness, Robert Carter. My father. The room exploded with angry voices. They planned the whole thing. That's unbelievable. Who does that to their own daughter? But my mind was focused on something else. Something that didn't make sense. I stared at the date on the document again. 3 days ago. 3 days ago my parents had officially witnessed my sister's marriage paperwork. 3 days before my wedding. My heart sank. You were already planning their wedding, I said. My father nodded slowly. Yes. And you still let me walk down the aisle today? No answer. No apology. Just silence. But Mark suddenly frowned again. Something else is wrong. Everyone looked at him. What now? Daniel asked nervously. Mark studied the license carefully. Then he looked up at me with a strange expression. Elena. I need to ask you something. What? Did you ever sign any wedding paperwork? I shook my head. No. Did you apply for a marriage license with Daniel? No. Mark nodded slowly. Then this shouldn't be possible. My heart started pounding again. What shouldn't be possible? Mark pointed at the document. This license was issued using Daniel's identification. So? Lily said impatiently. So that means something important, Mark continued. What? Several guests asked. Mark looked at Daniel. Then at Lily. Then back at me. And finally said the sentence that made the entire church go silent again. According to this document, Daniel was legally married before this license was issued. The room froze. What? Lily snapped. That's impossible. But Mark shook his head. The system only issues a new license if the previous marriage has ended. My breath caught in my throat. You mean, I whispered. Mark nodded slowly. Yes. Then he looked directly at Daniel. Daniel, who were you married to before this? Daniel's face turned completely pale. He looked like a man whose worst secret had just been dragged into the light. And suddenly, I realized something terrifying. The betrayal might not have started with Lily. It might have started long before I even met Daniel. The entire church was silent again. Not a whisper. Not a movement. Just 200 people staring at Daniel like he was a stranger. Mark's words hung in the air. Daniel was legally married before this license was issued. Lily's confident smile disappeared instantly. What are you talking about? She snapped. That's impossible. But Mark calmly held up the camera screen. The license number shows it was issued through the county system, he explained. And the system only allows a new license if the previous marriage has been dissolved. Daniel looked like he couldn't breathe. My heart pounded violently. Daniel, I whispered. Tell us the truth. He ran a hand through his hair and looked down at the floor. I was going to tell everyone eventually. Those words again. That horrible sentence. I was going to tell you. Lily grabbed his arm angrily. Tell us what? Daniel hesitated. Then he finally spoke. I was married before. The room erupted with gasps. Lily stepped away from him like he had suddenly become dangerous. You never told me that. Daniel looked defensive. It ended years ago. How many years? Someone in the crowd asked. Daniel hesitated again. 2. The entire church exploded. 2 years? That means he was still married when he met Elena. My mind went blank. 2 years. That timeline made something click in my memory. Daniel and I had met 3 years ago. Which meant... You were married when we started dating, I said slowly. Daniel didn't answer. But he didn't deny it either. And that was enough. My stomach twisted. So not only did you cheat on me with my sister, I said quietly. You cheated on your wife with me first. Daniel rubbed his temples. It wasn't like that. Oh, really? I snapped. Then explain it. He looked around at the furious crowd. Then finally admitted it. My marriage was already falling apart when I met you. That explanation made several guests groan in disbelief. Lily looked furious. You told me you'd never been married before. Daniel looked at her nervously. I didn't want to scare you away. That sentence only made things worse. My aunt suddenly shouted from the front row. So where is your ex-wife now? The question hung in the air. Daniel's face changed instantly. Panic flashed in his eyes. That's not important, he said quickly. But Mark frowned. Actually, it might be. Everyone turned toward the photographer again. What do you mean? I asked. Mark was scrolling through his camera again. I took pictures during the rehearsal dinner last night, he explained. And I noticed something strange. My heart started racing again. What? Mark turned the camera toward us. This woman. The photo appeared on the screen. It showed the rehearsal dinner table. Guests laughing. Glasses raised. But Mark zoomed in on one specific person sitting quietly at the edge of the table. A woman I didn't recognize. Dark hair. Simple black dress. Watching Daniel carefully. "Who is she?" someone asked. Daniel looked like he had seen a ghost. That's just a guest." But Mark shook his head. "No." He zoomed in closer. "And look at this." The photo sharpened. The woman's hand rested on the table. And on her finger was a wedding ring. The exact same style as Daniel's. The church gasped loudly. My pulse raced. "Daniel," I whispered. "Who is she?" He didn't answer. The silence stretched for several painful seconds. Until the woman herself stood up from the back row. Every head turned toward her. She walked slowly down the aisle. Her expression calm. Too calm. When she reached the altar, she looked directly at Daniel. "Go ahead," she said coldly. "Tell them." Daniel's face had turned completely white. "You weren't supposed to come here," he muttered. She laughed quietly. "Oh, please." Then she turned to face the entire church. "My name is Caroline Hayes," she said clearly. "And I'm still Daniel's wife." The room exploded. People shouted. Chairs scraped against the floor. Someone even dropped a glass. But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Because suddenly everything made sense. The lies. The secrets. The strange behavior. Daniel hadn't just been cheating. He had been living two separate lives. Lily looked furious now. "You told me you were divorced." Daniel tried to speak. "I was in the process." "Don't lie," Caroline interrupted. Her voice was sharp and confident. "We never filed for divorce." The church fell silent again. Caroline continued calmly. "In fact, Daniel asked me not to come today." She looked directly at me. "But when I heard he was getting married again..." She paused. "I decided I should probably attend." My hands trembled. "So legally," I said slowly, "he can't marry anyone." Caroline nodded. "Exactly." Lily stared at Daniel in disbelief. "So this entire wedding," she looked around the church, "was illegal?" Caroline smiled slightly. "Oh, much worse than illegal." Everyone stared at her. "What do you mean?" someone asked. Caroline looked at Daniel again. Then she said the sentence that made the entire church freeze once more. "Because the truth is..." She paused. Daniel wasn't planning to marry Lily either. The room went silent. Daniel's face collapsed. And suddenly, I realized the scandal was about to become even bigger. The church felt like it was holding its breath. Caroline's words echoed through the room. Daniel wasn't planning to marry Lily either. Everyone stared at her. Even Lily. "What are you talking about?" Lily demanded. Caroline folded her arms calmly. "I mean exactly what I said." She turned toward Daniel. "Go on," she said coldly. "Tell them." Daniel looked like a man trapped in a corner. Sweat covered his forehead. I can explain." But nobody believed him anymore. Lily stepped closer to him. "You told me we were going to start a new life together," she said angrily. Daniel avoided her eyes. That was the idea. The idea? Lily snapped. What does that mean? Daniel didn't answer. And that silence made Caroline laugh. A cold, bitter laugh. Oh, this is priceless, she said. Everyone turned toward her again. You both think Daniel actually planned to marry either of you? The room fell silent. My stomach twisted. What do you mean? I asked quietly. Caroline sighed. Daniel doesn't marry for love. She looked around the church. He marries for money. Several guests gasped. Daniel finally shouted, "That's not true." But Caroline ignored him. Elena, she said, looking directly at me, who paid for most of this wedding? I swallowed. I did. Caroline nodded. And who paid the venue deposit? I did. The catering? My savings. The decorations? Also me. Caroline spread her hands. There you go. Lily frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Caroline smiled slightly. Everything. She pulled out her phone. Then she opened a document and showed it to Mark. Can you zoom in on this? She asked. Mark leaned closer and nodded slowly. Oh wow. My heart began racing again. What is it? I asked. Mark turned the phone screen toward everyone. It was a bank statement. Daniel's name at the top. And several large deposits listed. Deposits from me. The church erupted with shocked voices. Wait, he took her money? Caroline nodded calmly. For 3 years. My stomach dropped. What? Daniel stepped forward angrily. That's not what it looks like. Caroline raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? She scrolled further. More payments appeared. Wedding planning transfers. Vendor payments. Savings withdrawals. All connected to Daniel's accounts. My hands started shaking. You told me the money was going into our future home, I whispered. Daniel looked desperate. It was supposed to. But it didn't, Caroline said sharply. She looked directly at Lily. And you want to know the best part? Lily crossed her arms. What? Caroline smiled coldly. Daniel promised me the same thing. The room froze. What? Lily said. Caroline nodded. Yes. She turned toward Daniel. Tell them about the house in Miami. Daniel's face turned pale again. What house? Someone asked. Caroline held up her phone again. This time it showed property documents. A luxury apartment listing. Purchased recently. The buyer name at the top. Daniel Hayes. But the funding source? 3 different bank accounts. Mine. Lily's. And Daniel's. The church exploded again. He used both of them. That's insane. Lily looked like she might faint. You said that apartment was for us, she whispered. Daniel looked trapped. It was supposed to be. Caroline laughed again. You really believe that? She turned toward the crowd. Daniel told me he planned to sell it next year. After the wedding gifts came in. The room fell completely silent. Because everyone suddenly understood the plan. Daniel never intended to stay married. To anyone. He just wanted the money. the gifts, the property. Then he would disappear. My chest felt heavy. So the engagement. Daniel stayed silent. The proposal. Silence. The wedding. Nothing. My voice broke. You were just using me. Daniel finally spoke. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Those words sounded weak now. Pathetic. Lily stared at him in disbelief. You told me you loved me. Daniel didn't respond. Because he couldn't. Caroline crossed her arms again. Daniel's done this before. The room gasped again. What? Someone shouted. Caroline nodded. Yes. She opened another photo on her phone. Then handed it to Mark. Mark turned the screen toward the guests. It showed Daniel at another wedding. Standing beside another bride. In another white dress. 3 years ago, Caroline said. That bride was me. The church erupted into chaos again. People started shouting. Guests were recording everything now. But Daniel looked completely defeated. Because there was nothing left to hide. And then Mark suddenly spoke again. Actually. Everyone turned toward him. What? I asked. Mark held up his camera. There's still one thing nobody noticed. My stomach dropped again. What now? Mark zoomed into one of the photos he took earlier that morning. The parking lot photo. Daniel and Lily kissing. But this time, he zoomed further. Into the reflection of the car window behind them. And what appeared in that reflection made my heart stop. Someone else had been watching them. Someone none of us expected. And that person had recorded everything. The entire church leaned forward. Mark had zoomed into the photo so much that the image looked grainy. But one thing was clear. In the reflection of the black car window behind Daniel and Lily, someone was standing there, holding a phone, recording them. A ripple of whispers spread through the guests. Who is that? Someone was filming them? Daniel stared at the camera screen. His face drained of color. Because he recognized the person instantly. And apparently, he didn't want anyone else to. Mark zoomed in further. The figure in the reflection became slightly clearer. A tall man. Dark jacket. Phone raised. Filming Daniel and Lily kissing. My heart started pounding again. Do you know who that is? I asked Mark. Mark shook his head. I didn't even notice him when I took the picture. He turned the camera toward Daniel. But I think he does. Every eye in the church shifted toward Daniel again. Daniel looked like he wanted to run. It's nobody, he said quickly. But his voice betrayed him. It was shaking. And everyone noticed. Caroline folded her arms. Oh, this should be good. Lily glared at Daniel. Who is that? Daniel didn't answer. Which only made things worse. I stepped closer. Daniel, I said quietly. You've lied about everything else today. So start telling the truth. The silence stretched painfully. Then suddenly, a voice spoke from the back of the church. I think that's me. Everyone turned. A man slowly stood up from the last row. Mid-30s. Wearing a simple suit. Holding a phone. And yes, the same dark jacket from the reflection. He walked calmly down the aisle. The crowd parted as he passed. Daniel looked like he might collapse. "Jason," he muttered. The man stopped near the altar. He looked at Daniel with quiet disappointment. "Hey, Dan." The church waited. "What's going on?" someone whispered. The man looked at Mark. "Can you show that reflection again?" Mark nodded and turned the camera screen. Jason smiled slightly. "Yep," he said. "That's definitely me." My confusion grew. "Who are you?" I asked. Jason turned toward me kindly. "My name is Jason Miller." Then he glanced at Daniel again. "And I'm Daniel's business partner." Daniel immediately shook his head. "No, you're not." Jason laughed. "Oh, really?" He pulled out his phone. Then he tapped a few times. A document appeared on the screen. Mark looked at it and raised his eyebrows. "Wow." My heart started racing again. "What is it?" Mark turned the phone toward everyone. It was a business registration document. Company name: Hayes and Miller Consulting. Owners listed underneath: Daniel Hayes, Jason Miller. Daniel looked furious now. "That company is inactive," he said quickly. Jason smirked. "Not exactly." He looked at the crowd. "Daniel and I used to run a financial consulting business." Several guests leaned closer. Jason continued calmly. "But 2 years ago, I discovered something interesting." Daniel shouted suddenly. "Stop talking." Jason ignored him. Daniel had been stealing money from our clients. The room exploded again. "What?" "That's fraud." Jason nodded. "Yes." He looked toward me and Lily. "And apparently, he's been doing the same thing with relationships." My stomach dropped. "You mean, this isn't the first time?" Jason shook his head. "No." He pulled up another document. Then handed it to Mark. Mark showed it to the crowd. A list of bank transfers. Different women's names. Different years. Large amounts of money. All connected to Daniel. Caroline sighed. I tried telling people. Lily looked completely stunned now. "You've been scamming women?" she asked Daniel. Daniel looked desperate. "That's not true." But Jason calmly raised his phone. "Actually, I recorded everything yesterday." The room fell silent. "What do you mean?" I asked. Jason opened a video. Then turned the screen toward Mark. Mark connected it to the large display screen in the church. And suddenly, everyone saw it. The video showed the church parking lot. Daniel and Lily standing beside the black car. Kissing. Then talking. But what Daniel said next made the entire room gasp. "Once the wedding gifts come in," Daniel said in the video, "I'll sell the Miami apartment." Lily's voice followed. "And Elena?" Daniel laughed. "She'll survive." The video continued. "And you?" Lily asked. Daniel smiled confidently. "I'll disappear before anyone figures it out." The church exploded into chaos. People shouted angrily. Some guests stood up to leave. Others started filming the screen. But Daniel looked completely finished now. Because there was no denying it. The evidence was right there. I felt strangely calm. The anger. The heartbreak. The humiliation. All of it had burned away, leaving only clarity. I looked at Daniel one last time. "You didn't just lose the wedding today," I said quietly. "You lost everything." Daniel didn't respond. Because suddenly, two uniformed officers appeared at the entrance of the church. Someone had already called the police, and they were walking straight toward the altar. But the biggest shock of the day was still about to happen. Because one final truth about my parents was about to come out. And when it did, the entire church would realize that this betrayal started long before Daniel ever entered my life. The church doors opened slowly. Two police officers walked down the aisle. Their footsteps echoed through the silent room. Everyone moved aside as they approached the altar. Daniel looked like he had completely given up. The video Jason played had destroyed any chance of him escaping the truth. One of the officers spoke calmly. "Daniel Hayes?" Daniel didn't answer. The officer stepped closer. "Sir, we need you to come with us." The crowd watched in stunned silence as Daniel slowly lowered his head. For the first time that day, he looked afraid. Lily grabbed his arm. "Daniel, say something." But Daniel gently pulled his arm away. "There's nothing left to say." The officer placed handcuffs around his wrists. Gasps filled the church again. A wedding that had started with flowers and music was ending with an arrest. As they began walking him toward the exit, Daniel looked back at me. "Elena. I'm sorry." But those words meant nothing now. Because the man I thought I loved never really existed. The doors closed behind the officers. And for the first time all day, the room felt quiet. But the silence didn't last long. Because someone else suddenly spoke. "Jason. There's still one thing left," he said. My heart sank again. "What now?" Jason looked toward my parents. Then toward Lily. This scam didn't start with Daniel. The room froze. My father's face turned pale instantly. "Jason," he said sharply, "that's enough." But Jason ignored him. He turned toward the crowd. "I investigated Daniel's finances 2 years ago," he explained. "And during that investigation, I discovered something strange." Everyone listened carefully. Daniel wasn't the only person receiving money transfers. Jason raised his phone again. And guess who else appeared in those transactions? My stomach twisted. He turned the phone toward Mark again. Mark zoomed in. And suddenly 2 familiar names appeared on the screen. Robert Carter. Margaret Carter. My parents. The entire church erupted again. Wait, what? They were involved? I felt like the ground disappeared under my feet. "Dad." I whispered. My father looked furious now. "That's not what it looks like." But Jason calmly shook his head. "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like." He opened another document. Bank transfers. Large amounts. Dates going back several years. Payments from Daniel to my parents. My mother burst into tears. We didn't know what he was doing. But Jason responded immediately. "You absolutely did." He pointed to one specific transfer. "This payment was made 2 days after you signed Lily's marriage license." The church murmured loudly again. My chest tightened painfully. You were being paid? I asked. My father looked defeated now. We were trying to help Lily. Lily's head snapped toward him. Wait, what? My father sighed heavily. You've always struggled financially, he said. We thought Daniel could provide for you. The room fell silent. So you helped him scam your other daughter? Someone shouted from the crowd. My mother cried harder. We thought Elena would recover. Those words broke something inside me. For a moment I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Couldn't even breathe properly. My own parents had sold me out. Not just emotionally. Financially. Finally I spoke. Do you know what hurts the most? Everyone turned toward me. It's not Daniel. I looked directly at my parents. It's you. My voice trembled slightly. I trusted you more than anyone. My father looked ashamed. But it was far too late for apologies. The silence stretched for several seconds. Then Mark, the photographer, suddenly spoke again. Well, there's one small silver lining. Everyone looked at him. What? Someone asked. Mark lifted his camera. I captured everything today. He smiled slightly. And I mean everything. Jason laughed. That video alone is already trending online. Guests started checking their phones. Within seconds, whispers spread through the church. Oh my God. It's already viral. Millions of views. I looked around the room. The wedding decorations. The flowers. The guests. The dress. Everything that had once meant happiness now felt like part of a strange movie. But oddly enough, I didn't feel broken anymore. I felt free. I walked slowly down the altar steps. Then I stopped in front of my parents. I hope it was worth it, I said quietly. Neither of them answered. Then I turned toward Lily. For the first time all day. She didn't look confident. She looked completely lost. Enjoy the apartment, I said. If Daniel didn't already sell it. As I walked toward the church doors, Mark called after me. Elena! I turned. He smiled kindly. You may not have gotten a wedding today. He lifted the camera. But you did get one hell of a story. For the first time that day. I smiled. Because he was right. The wedding was ruined. The family was broken. The lies were exposed. But one thing was certain. The truth had won. And sometimes, that's the best ending anyone can get.